All right, today we're jumping into one of the biggest, most incredible stories in all of science. We're talking about the story of evolution itself. I mean, just think about that for a second. This is the big question, right? It's the mystery that sits at the very heart of biology. How on earth did we get from the simplest little speck of life to the absolute explosion of complexity we see all around us today? Well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to piece that answer together. And the first huge piece of this puzzle came from the man himself, Charles Darwin. Back in 1859, he managed to boil down his entire revolutionary theory into just three simple words: descent with modification. It sounds so simple, but that little phrase, well, it completely changed the world. But what did he actually mean by that? What are we really talking about when we say evolution? So let's break it down and get to the core idea. Okay, so at its heart, evolution is really just a process of change. But, and this is key, it's not about one single animal changing during its lifetime. It's about how entire populations of organisms change over many, many, many generations. It's slow, it's always happening, and as we're about to see, it's a one-way street. Now, of course, Darwin didn't just dream this up out of nowhere. People have been looking at the world and wondering about all this diversity for centuries. So let's rewind the clock a bit and see how thinkers before Darwin first tried to make sense of it all. For a long, long time, the main idea was something called special creation. The belief was basically that all species were created exactly as they are today and that they've never changed. Life was seen as totally static. But then, in the early 1800s, this naturalist, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, came along with a pretty radical new idea, that life isn't static, it's dynamic. He argued that species can and do change based on their environment. And he even came up with a way he thought it all worked. He had this idea of an internal urge for organisms to improve. His most famous concept, though, was use and disuse. You've probably heard the classic example, the giraffe. Lamarck thought that ancient giraffes stretched their necks to reach higher leaves, and all hot stretching literally made their necks longer. And then, this is the really crucial part of his whole theory, he believed those newly stretched out necks, these acquired traits, were then passed down to their babies. So we know now that Lamarck's mechanism was wrong. I mean, if you go to the gym and get really muscular, you don't pass those muscles on to your kids, right? But you've got to give the guy credit. He was the first person to propose a real scientific theory for how evolution might work. And most importantly, he was the first to connect an organism's adaptations directly to its environment. He really did set the stage for what was coming next. And that revolution, of course, arrived with Charles Darwin. His big idea didn't just pop into his head, though. It was something he carefully built, piece by piece, from the observations and ideas of so many others. What's so amazing about Darwin is that he was a master synthesizer. He was incredible at connecting the dots. He took ideas from everywhere. From the geologist Charles Lyell, he got the idea that the Earth itself changes incredibly slowly over vast amounts of time. From the economist Thomas Malthus, he borrowed this concept of a struggle for existence. He looked at farmers and pigeon breeders and saw how they could pick and choose treats. And then, of course, there was his 5-year voyage on the HMS Beagle, which gave him a world of evidence, most famously those unique little finches on the Galapagos Islands. And here's the genius of how he put it all together. His mechanism, natural selection, is just a super logical 5-step process. Okay, so step 1, overproduction. Way more babies are born than can ever survive. Step 2, variation. Every single individual in that group is a little bit different from the others. That leads to step 3, a struggle for existence. And within that struggle, some of those individuals will just happen to have variations that give them a slight edge. That is natural selection. They're the ones who are more likely to survive, have kids, and pass on those winning traits. And over huge, mind-boggling spans of time, those tiny advantages stack up, eventually creating a whole new species. And the cool thing is, we can actually see this happen. The peppered moths in England during the Industrial Revolution are the perfect example. See, before all the factories, most of these moths were a light speckled gray, which was perfect camouflage against the lichen on the trees. But then, soot from the factories turned all those trees black. Suddenly, the rare, dark-colored moths had the advantage. Birds could now easily see and snatch up the light gray ones, and the black moth population just exploded. That's it. That's natural selection, playing out right in front of our eyes. But for all its brilliance, Darwin's theory had one giant blind spot. He saw variation everywhere. He knew it was the fuel for the engine of natural selection, But he had absolutely no idea where it came from or how traits were actually passed from a parent to their child. The whole science of genetics just hadn't been invented yet. So let's fast forward now into the 20th century and see how science finally found that missing piece and finished Darwin's amazing puzzle. This became known as the modern synthesis. And what it did was fuse Darwin's natural selection with the brand new science of genetics, which was pioneered by Gregor Mendel. For the first time ever, we understood where all that variation came from. Things like random genetic mutations, just tiny copying errors in DNA that create new traits out of thin air. Or gene flow, which happens when different populations migrate and mix their genes together. And even genetic drift, which is just the random chance that some traits become more common, especially if a population is small. With all these pieces in place, evolution could finally be defined with real precision. It's simply a change in the frequency of genes or a population over time. Okay, so now that we have the full picture, the complete theory, we can step back and look at some of the really fascinating patterns. You could almost call them rules that evolution seems to follow across the whole tree of life. First up, we've got Dollo's law, the law of irreversibility. And it's simple. Evolution is a one-way street. Once a really complex feature, like a limb or an eye, is lost over time, it's not going to just re-evolve in exactly the same way. The path evolution takes is never truly retraced. Then you have Cope's rule. This is the observation that in a whole bunch of different evolutionary lines, from horses to dinosaurs, there seems to be this general trend for animals to get bigger over time. Now, bigger isn't always better, but it often gives an organism an advantage, in fighting for food or not getting eaten. So it's a surprisingly common pattern we see. Okay, now let's clear up two ideas that can get a little confusing. First, there's parallel evolution. This is when two related species end up evolving similar traits all on their own. Think about monkeys in different parts of the world. They started with a similar genetic toolkit, and facing similar challenges, they evolved in similar ways. But then you have convergent evolution. This is when totally unrelated species end up with the same solution to the same problem. The best example is wings, right? Bats, birds, insects, they all figured out how to fly, but they did it from completely different evolutionary starting points. It's a case of different origins, but the same brilliant solution. And this brings us right back where we started, in a way, with Darwin's finches. They are the textbook example of what's called adaptive radiation. This is what happens when a single species finds itself in a new place with lots of open opportunities. It just explodes into a bunch of new species, and each new one specializes to fill a specific role. So you get one finch with a beak perfect for cracking seeds, and another with a beak perfect for grabbing insects, and on and on. And all this leads to a really crucial idea. All of these huge, grand patterns are just the result of tiny, observable changes adding up over incredible amounts of time. We call those small changes inside a population, like the finch's beaks getting a tiny bit bigger after a drought, microevolution. But when those small changes build up, over millions and millions of years, they lead to macroevolution. We're talking about the origin of entirely new kinds of life, like birds evolving from dinosaurs. Microevolution is the engine, and when you let that engine run for long enough, it drives the massive, sweeping changes of macroevolution. Which leaves us with one last really fascinating thought to chew on. Evolution didn't stop with the dinosaurs. It didn't stop with us. It's happening right now, all the time. So if life on this planet is always changing, always adapting, always becoming something new, what does that mean for the future of life on Earth? And what does it mean for the future of our own species?